Well, everybody, welcome back to the Trig Podcast of Joy and Gosa TV on this lovely Friday, May 1st, Laborers Day, International Work Day. Welcome back and congratulations to all of the laborers all over the world. Obviously, right now, a lot of people can't work, are out of work, are underemployed, unemployed. And even those that are employed feel like they can't do what they normally want to do or should do or wish they could do because of what's happening. This opportunity, this narrative, this experience, this transition, as I'm calling it. I don't call it a crisis. I call it a transition. But regardless, happy International Work Day. I know in the U.S. we don't celebrate this as we should because of different political issues. But I know that as an immigrant, and even just as a I guess activist, I do think that this day is important for us to protest and to feel alive, especially these days when we feel so numb by the overprotection or maybe the over fear of what could happen, what is happening, what isn't happening, and all the rest with this situation. But I wanted to check in today, and I'm just adjusting the volume here. Checking in regarding what are some of the lessons that you've learned in this transition. You know, I was listening to a poet. His name is Ocean Vuong yesterday. Very articulate young man from Vietnam. Grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, I believe, or Hartford, New York. I think it's New York. And he was talking about Noah's Ark. I preached a message on Noah's Ark 2 weeks ago, and he wasn't talking about this particular virus, but because I think he mentioned Noah's Ark in March, so right before this whole thing happened. But he has mentioned it before, how Noah's Ark is a metaphor for transitions, and what are you going to take in the boat with you that matters most to you? Interesting question. And it got me thinking about this question that I posed today of what have you learned? What are you taking with you into the new earth, into this new world that awaits us on the other side of this thing? Obviously, we don't know exactly what this new world will look like. How new will it be? How old will it be? Will it be the same old, same old? Will you be the same person? Will things change? Are you going to be forced to adjust your life? Or is life going to be the same as always? Let me actually get the chat going here, see if we can see that. Let's see, I think there it is. So I'm trying a couple new things with the chat, but I wanted to at least see. Hello, everyone. Let's type in a couple of comments here, see if they show up. Okay, there we go. I have this new chat. I mean, the one you see is not new. I've used it, but I have another one that is new that is supposed to show up somewhere. I don't know exactly if it's working yet. Oh, there it was. I think I saw something. Yeah, there it is at the bottom. See, it says hello, everyone. Okay, great. Okay, there it is. So let me just make it a little bigger. So, well, it disappeared. So I think that's working. Great. Okay. So we'll just put both, I guess, up here just for now. Let me type in again another one. Hello again. And watch, I think you'll see it. There it is. See in the top? And it's prettier, huh? It's got the colors and then it disappears by itself. So I guess we'll use that one. I like that one. So we'll just leave that there. And let me type another one here. One more time. Let's see here. I think you'll see the chat there in a second. There it is. Have fun. Look at that. We'll move it to the left there a little bit. There you go. So leave a comment. It'll show up on the screen there. Nice and bright and pretty. So lessons learned. What have you learned? So I want to give you a few hints. At least you got to start to leave me a comment below. Let me know how you're doing, what you're up to today. And most of all, let me know what lessons have you learned. We have, I think, one person here live. So maybe we'll wait a few minutes to see if we get two. Sometimes I get as much as 5, 6 people here live. I think they leave right away. I don't know. I'm not entertaining enough, I guess. Maybe I should be more funny or have my wife with me, that definitely would help a lot. But I'm going to wait a few seconds. But just talking about, as I said, lessons learned. What have we learned? What do you wish you would have learned? What would you like to have learned? I was talking to a friend the other day, and she was saying, I feel like I've wasted these last 6 weeks of my life. I wonder if most people feel like they've wasted these 6 weeks, that they haven't learned anything. And I think that's nothing to be ashamed about. Perhaps it is how most people feel. I don't think there's any shame in that. Because when you are dealing with survival and life and death type of stuff, let's see, do you feel like you've wasted time? Do you feel like you've wasted this opportunity, this transition? I know it's not over yet. I know we're still going through it, and some states are, quote, reopening, and here in California, I think it's going to be another 4 weeks. But whatever, right? At some point, we're going to have to get through this and transition. Thank you, by the way, for being here. We have 5 people here, so welcome. My name is David Trig. Leave me a comment below. We're asking the question, what have you learned during this transition? So leave me a comment. You'll see it on the screen there. I'm trying a few new features that might be fun. So what have you learned? Do you feel like you've wasted time? You feel like, I don't mean like watching Netflix or playing too many video games or sleeping too much. I don't mean wasting time that way. I mean, do you feel like you've learned anything about yourself, a skill? I think mostly about ourselves, right? What have you learned about yourself, about your strength, about your bad habits, about your tendencies, about, especially, obviously, I think the biggest lesson is, what do you tend to do under stress? I think it would be good, without judgment, of course, to look back at the last 5-6 weeks, look at your schedule, look at your life, look at mostly your mental health. Sorry about that door there. It's a lot of pretty windy in here. And my guess is that you have some data now, right, of how you responded to this and how you are responding right now. What would you say? What have you learned? If you are a person of faith, like I know a lot of people that are here normally, we are people of faith. We are Jesus followers. Did Jesus become more real to you? Did your faith become more distant? Another question that I think people are asking is, do you think people are going to go to church? Meaning people that normally don't go to church. Do you feel like your family, your friends, people that you know, let's say you have a son or a daughter or a brother that doesn't go to church, do you think they're going to go to church now? Or do you think that people are going to be more resistant even to church because they didn't see us as Christians really make a difference? They didn't hear any religious leaders truly lead the way. I wonder if maybe, or was it perhaps that people feel like God was real to them in the privacy of their own homes? Or do you think that people did log in or tune in to the online worship services? Now, think about your actual family and friends. So, I always like to think about, do I know anybody that actually tuned in to, let's say, my shows here and these programs that normally didn't before this whole thing happened? And I would say, yes, sure. Do I know actual names, people in my life, family, friends, maybe the random person here and there? Yeah, I can say that. One thing that I mentioned yesterday, I have this note here from my UPS guy. You see that there? It says UPS. And you can't see it there because of the light, but you can see it there. It says, thank you for the kind words. Thank you for the kind words. Now, what does that mean? Well, like 7 weeks ago, when this whole thing began, Rochelle and I, my wife and I, we made a sign. You probably can go back and see it on my Instagram page. You can go on Instagram and follow me there at David Trig. And the sign said, "We're praying for you." And it was a picture of Rochelle and I just smiling, her beautiful blue eyes. I was wearing a tie even. I mean, wow, right? And it said, we're praying for you. We will get through this. And it'd been out there. The sign has been out there, as I said, for 7-8 weeks. It's been rained on. The sprinklers have come on it. It's, the sun, the wind, it's fallen a million times. And here's the irony. I mentioned this the other day. The day that the UPS man, well, to make the point of the story, the UPS man, you know how like the UPS guys are everywhere these days. He saw the sign and he left us this note. And it says, thank you for the kind words and a little happy face. Isn't that amazing? Now, here's the irony. I was about to just throw the sign in the trash that day, just because I thought, does anybody even notice? Do I even believe this anymore? I was kind of having one of those days like, is this ever going to end? And yet God was doing something special. So what did I learn from that? I learned how easy it is to give up and to never give up, because you have no idea how one word that comes from you might impact somebody else. So, yeah. So do you think that people, let's say the UPS man, you think that if I was to invite him to church or to my house, do you think he would come? Do you have anybody in your life that you can point to these last 7-8 weeks that you would say, I think this person would come closer to God if I talk to them, because maybe you shared a moment together, you had an experience together. I think even if we can't point to that, the point again is not to be like judging or measuring ourselves. I mean, as I said at the beginning, this has been a really crazy time where we have been trying to survive, right? It's tough to help somebody else when you're afraid for your own life. And yet, that is kind of what we're supposed to do, right? And I think we've all done our part. But I forgot what I was going to ask. But I guess, what I was saying, without judgment, do you feel like people are going to look for God more? Do you think that people are going to go to church after this thing transitions, when we transition and we get to the other side of Noah's Ark? Just kind of using that as an allegory for this season. Do you think that once we find land once again, do you think that people are going to go to church? Do you think that you, as a follower of Jesus, if you are someone who has been a Christian, do you feel closer to God? Do you feel closer to church? Do you feel closer to the people in your church? If you have been sort of in and out, the statistics are that 80% of Americans go to church once a month. So if you, let's say you're one of those Americans, one of those people that goes to church about once a month, do you think that you're now more apt to go twice or 3 times because your heart is stirred and you feel like, I need to get right with God, or I need people in my life, I need hope? I don't know. I was talking to a friend who's also a pastor, and we were both thinking that the people that, I like what he said the people that have been committed, they will be more committed. And the people that haven't been committed, they will remain uncommitted. And we weren't being pessimistic. We've both been in ministry for many years, but it seems like that might be the case. Of course, there'll always be exceptions. And I think that, let's say back to the UPS man, if my UPS man felt thankful for the kind words out there, because we said we're praying for you, maybe he would not come to church, but maybe he would, let's say we had, I don't know, a Bible study, or maybe I just had a get together, in our backyard or something. Would he want to come and get to know us better, and vice versa? Maybe. I think so, because that sign at least opened a path for us to be friends, or to be more than just customer. Have you experienced similar things? Have you experienced things like that? A sign, a connection that you made with a family member. Do you feel closer to your wife, to your husband, to your children? Let's not make it complicated. Do you feel closer to the people in your own home? Or has it all been the same? The other day I was walking down the street and I heard some of my neighbors yelling at each other about money and about, I don't know what else. And I thought, well, that stuff's still happening, right? I mean, do you feel like people are more in search of God than before? Do you feel that way? What is your experience? We have 4 people here online, so yeah, I'd love to hear your comments. What are your thoughts? What do you feel? Let's even type, do you feel closer to God? Here it is. We'll see that come up on the screen here in a second. Do you feel closer to God because of all that's happened? Do you feel the same? Do you feel like God wasn't even a part of your experience? Like I said, like my friend was saying, well, if you are a person of faith, then you probably do feel closer to God because you felt desperate, right? And normally when people feel desperate, they search for God, and God is always there, and people are always there. I got some pictures from a friend just a couple days ago of her bringing gifts to children. And any time that parents receive gifts for their kids, of course, they're going to be grateful. Like the UPS man, right? He's going to say, wow, that family here in Long Beach where we live put that sign that said, we're praying for you. And that really meant a lot to me. So David Chavez, yeah, thank you, my brother, says Romans 5:10. What does Romans 5:10 say, my brother? What is that passage? Escaping me right now. Romans 5, what does that say? To be ready at all seasons? No, it's Colossians. Let's see here. Let me look it up. Romans 5:10. Yeah, reconciled. That's right. Reconciled. Yeah. How we're justified by faith and reconciled. Exactly. I'm looking it up here in Espanol. My Bible is in Spanish. Let me look up the English version. Romans 5:10, it says, for if while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his son, much more now that we're reconciled shall we be saved by his life. Yeah. Yeah. And so if that is the invitation, do you think that people are taking advantage of that? And, one of the things that I am very convinced about is that the only way, and this is no revelation, the only way that the gospel is going to go out is if you and I share the gospel. And yet, I'm reading a book called Knowing How to Speak of God. And they did this study, I think, over the last few years in the church, how 90% of churchgoers don't talk about God outside of their church friends. So not like, your wife or your kids, but outside of the people that you normally go to church with, outside of that, I think it was 82%, something like that, of Americans, churchgoers, don't talk about God with people. And so how is the message going to get out there if 8 out of 10 Christians are afraid of conflict, or maybe they feel like they don't know enough, whatever it may be? Again, I'm not talking, there's no judgment here. I'm just talking about how is this going to change? How are people going to go to church? And I think that the idea of, well, the pastor or the church event is going to draw people, I think that that's what this crisis has taught us, right? Is that the events don't matter, that people can't even go to church these days. And yet I feel like, as my friend said, those who are committed, they're probably more committed, right? But here's the thing. As Christians, I think the danger that we fall into is we have this, what do they call it? Kind of like this escapist mentality. Like we just want to get out of here. Whereas the gospel is about us sharing the good news with people that are here alive. And so I don't, unless there's a change happening, but I don't think so, our message remains the same. Our call remains the same, to be a light. And yet the UPS man, he saw that sign, and maybe the next person, the next Christian friend that he may have at a party or at his birthday, maybe his wife who goes to church, has been praying for maybe his mom. In due season, as the Bible says, someone will water that seed. That's what I did, right? We water that seed that's been there in his life. Maybe he is a Christian. I don't know. And so perhaps in time that this gentleman will come to Jesus, will go to church. But I guess my point is, how will this change? How will we as people of God make a difference in this culture? It has to be one-on-one. It has to be through the UPS man. Reading something on your lawn. Social media? Yeah, I don't think so. No one has ever, that I can notice, that I can see, come closer to God through social media. I mean, except, of course, those who are already committed. Sure, encouragement, yes. But perhaps, I mean, as I said at the beginning of this broadcast, I have had some people in these last 7-8 weeks that normally aren't as close to Jesus, that maybe we're kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, come closer to God through these streams. And I think that has happened, right? And so social media can have that impact. And going back to what lessons have we learned, the question that I posed at the beginning, perhaps that is one question, or one lesson, is that social media and these live streams or videos or podcasts or, I don't know, quotes or memes or whatever people, do online, they can be helpful to help people get closer to God. And that's wonderful. I give glory to God for that. I just think that maybe I'm just speaking from my own life, that we as the people of God need to carry this more personally. We need to take this whole thing of spreading the good news more personal, more like it's on us, not on, I don't know who else we would think it would be on. The pastors? I mean, we are doing what we can, but I would say, I mean, as that study said, that 8 out of 10 Christians don't talk about God with their friends and families. So then that's probably why churches are dying, or why churches are aging, or why 80% of churches are people over 60. Because the newer generations are either going to the hip, cool churches where there's an event and a star pastor or a star event. I'm not against it. I'm just saying that that's what I see working. Or you have the other 90% of churches that are declining, or that have people that are over 60, mostly of white color, right? Because that generation held on to their values, and yet their kids and their grandkids lost some of their faith. In the Latino community, in the multi-ethnic church, you see a lot of people, young people that are mixed, or that are Latinos or African-American, Asian, or that look to God. But I've talked to many young people. I would say what I notice in them is their faith is, I would say it's 50-50. They would say, if the church does something for the poor, then I will go. But I think they have a lot of questions, a lot of information, they're testing different things. And that's obviously the age and the time to test theories. Do I see a lot of 20-somethings, 30-somethings rush the stage to the altar like we used to when we were kids? No, I don't see that. I think that young people are somewhat confused with what to believe, with what is truth, with what is right, with, are my parents, I want my parents' faith, but maybe that's not for me. You have issues of finances and sexuality and mental health issues, and obviously, finances and where am I going to live? How am I going to make it through? And you have conflict and anger, frustrations, alcohol abuse, etc. All of the real stuff of life. And so I think that young people can sometimes feel disillusioned. But I also see a lot of young people that are hardworking. I see some that are very committed to God. Not many. Or their commitment, perhaps, as I said, is more on their own terms. It's kind of like going to a soup plantation. It's sort of like, I'm going to just eat what I want, meaning healthy stuff, vegan stuff. And so, and this is not new, but church, perhaps for young people, is more of, let me see if there's something there for me. And there might be some who still give it all. The statistics are that young people don't tithe. They don't give to the church. Some do, but most don't. And so, and even people, their parents also don't give to the church. And so most churches are funded by people over 60. 80% of tithes and offerings come from older generations, mostly, as I said, white. And so you have all those metrics. And so is God changing all those metrics? Maybe that's what this, going back to the lessons learned, is God just changing all these metrics? Do any of these things matter? Does church attendance matter? Does giving to the church matter? I think that's what people are in some way saying. It doesn't matter. I don't care about those things. And so is this whole thing, at least for the churchgoers, telling us that we need to not care, or I'll just say, not care, not put any emphasis on the building, on people coming to church or in giving? And is there something else that we should be doing? And yet, where do we see people flocking to Jesus? I don't know. Are people praying in their homes, having Bible studies in their homes? Perhaps, right? I think one of the things that I do see, just to be, I guess, to think about the positives here, one of the things I do see is people reaching out for spiritual guidance and spiritual direction. I do see people needing guidance, not a sermon, not someone with a bunch of knowledge, or even an awesome event. I mean, those are all good things. People, we still all love a good production, right? But what I do see is people wanting guidance. I remember I had this couple a long time ago that would come to church to our Bible study, and then we stopped it for many reasons. We had, I think, like a summer break, and then I remember the wife said, "Oh, can you counsel us? Can you call my husband? Can you keep going with this?" And she saw me on the street once, and she said, "Are you starting that group once again? Because my husband and I really liked it." And it wasn't because of the knowledge or because of, I don't know, the event or the awesome room where we were meeting. We were just meeting in my office. It was because of the almost like spiritual direction that they were getting. And so she really enjoyed almost like the one-on-one counseling, but without the trappings of being in a counselor's couch. And for me personally, I love that. I love going to people's homes and praying. I love meeting with people in my office, in their homes, wherever, to talk openly, or not openly, but honestly and authentically about what they need. This family that I heard yelling at each other just down the street here, when I hear that, I am drawn to that. I might be crazy, but I want to knock on their door and say, "Can I help you?" And I'm not a therapist. I don't have a master's in family counseling. I'm no one, right? I'm just me. But in me, there is a love and hopefully some knowledge and discernment on how to help people. And that's how I evangelize. We have a backyard here in our home, and I got a little table the other day just to sit out there with my wife and my mom, who's here visiting. And I was telling my mom, I think maybe it was Rochelle, that my dream is to use those tables and chairs in my backyard to see this couple that lives down the street come over and we can counsel them. I don't like the word counsel. Again, I'm not a therapist, and I don't think people want therapy, but to advise, to guide, to answer questions. And I was telling her how my dream is, and we have a fire pit back there, is to have, especially I love 20s and 30 somethings, come to my house and maybe eat some food and ask questions. And for Rochelle and I, my mom, I don't know, my kids, for all of us to be able to provide guidance, not that we're gurus, but to share what we know. Kind of like the old days where we used to tell stories around the campfire, or like summer camp of old, when we used to go away to the mountains and hear the speaker inspire us, and to hear maybe to be in the cabin with a cabin leader, and he or she would pray with us at night, or just maybe the fun of being away in the mountains for a week or for a weekend. And so that's almost the experience that I want to create just here at the house, whether it's in the backyard or in our studio, and play some songs, maybe with musicians. As you know, I love music. I would love to evangelize through music, where it's not just for the band or for the worship team to come, but to have the musicians, let's say of the church, bring their girlfriends and boyfriends and friends that may not know Jesus, that may not do church or God, that may even be against God or religion, feel welcomed and be able to have a relationship and a conversation around sexuality, atheism, Buddhism, and the law of attraction, and positive mindset and manifestation, and the universe and energy, and climate change, and politics, and religion, and money, and finances, and career, and personality. I mean, all the things that are real, and addictions, and should I get married, and how do I know if this is, I think that young people teach me all the time how real life is to them. They don't have taboo subjects like we grew up with. To them, everything is okay. I don't mean that they do everything bad. I mean that they want to talk and converse around issues of, am I gay? Am I maybe supposed to be single for the rest of my life? Maybe I don't want to leave home. I want to honor my parents, of course. But I'm an atheist, so these very, very important topics that young people and therefore their parents deal with, and definitely their friends, I long to create here in my house, in my backyard, in our studio, in our living room, safe places for conversations to take place without judgment, without preaching, without exposing and pounding people with the Bible over their heads. And it doesn't have to be just 20-somethings. It might be a 45-year-old man. Especially, I think males, we deal with this shame that we don't know what to do with. This, what is it that Frank Volk said, that we are living, that men deal with lives of quiet desperation. And so, I'm not, quote, a men's ministry guy, but obviously I love to talk to other husbands, men, of course, because I understand what it's like to be a father and a husband. And where do you talk about a marriage that needs to be revamped? Things that my wife and I talk about often. Where do you talk safely as a husband about how to rekindle that sexual passion, of our 20s, now that we're in our late 40s and early 50s? And before you have an affair, before you just lose that fire, and before you start looking at 28-year-olds and 35-year-olds. I mean, these are the real things that the church is about, right? That our faith is about. Or as a woman, how do you keep a positive mindset about your body, about the financial struggles of your husband? How do you still respect your husband even though maybe he's struggling emotionally or financially? And so, the church has built obviously a lot of mechanisms, small groups and therapy and celebrate recovery and worship and teaching and all the rest. But I think that what I'm taking into this new world, just going back to this question here of what lessons have we learned, what I've noticed is the need for immediacy. You have to get to the point right away. I don't have time to have you come to church once a month and maybe see you in 3 months and maybe have you come online every 6 months. And then maybe in 9 months, we'll talk about your issue with depression or alcoholism or pornography or maybe with body image issues. By then it's too late, right? Or you're just stuck in your own ways. And then church leaders, we get busy and stressed out about money and buildings and who's complaining about music or whatever it is, right? So I think what this this crisis, this opportunity has taught us is the importance of removing all the trappings, all the stuff that gets in the way of actual relationship and love and guidance and aid. I mean, isn't that what we hate about government and bureaucracy, is when you see the need that someone has, and yet it takes years for that debt to be forgiven. You know, or only the rich are the ones that get help, and the poor are suffering without aid. Isn't that what we despise about government, or about politics, or about bureaucracy or education? Why, like someone was saying, why am I paying my school debt, and yet with the snap of a finger, the government can help businesses and airlines and whatever with trillions of dollars? Why can't they forgive school debts? Why can't they just print money? I was thinking about jobs, and I thought, let's say you make $1,000 a month. I mean, obviously that's nothing, but let's just say, you know, I don't mean that's nothing. Maybe that's where you're at. My point is that that's not enough to pay your bills, right? But let's say you make $1,000, right? And let's say $800 of that goes to rent. But what if rent is free? What if the government somehow pays the landlords what they need, and rent is free to you? Let's say you're renting an apartment, and obviously you're paying more than $800. Let's say you're paying $2,000. Imagine if that rent was gone. If the government, or through taxing, or let's say that whole thing crumbles and the landlords are still getting what they deserve, right? Now you don't need to make $3,000 a month, because your rent went from $2,000 to zero. And now before greed steps in and we're like, oh, cool, more money so I can eat more and I can buy more clothes and spend it more on movies and Starbucks and food. What if instead we say, well, maybe I don't need to make that much money. Maybe I am okay making $2,000 a month now that there's no rent to pay. Would you then work less hours and go to church, or forget church? Maybe you have time for your wife and your kids. Isn't that what we've learned? Another lesson that we've learned is that our families is what matters. I mean, that's something I've learned. Part of what I'm, quote, afraid of losing, I guess maybe this is a way to put it, as we move out of this, I guess we're moving out of this zone, is the time that I've spent with my family that's been so rich for me and for them. I mean, something as simple as this morning, because we're all here at home, our beautiful boy's phone died. And so normally, you know, Rochelle would have to, I don't know, come home at, not come home, but at night we'd take care of it. And maybe it would take a couple of days for either Rochelle or I to get to that and, you know, go online and look up the upgrade plans, or go to the store on the weekend, you know, because we have work, right? But because we're all here at home, meaning me in this case, I went online, I called Rochelle, asked for some, you know, usernames and whatever for Sprint. And, you know, there's a pretty good plan on there. And I was able to help David, our son, just get a phone. And he'll be here next week sometime. I mean, I know that's mundane and like simple, but you know what happened? So I did that for maybe, I don't know, it took me like an hour. You know, it takes forever, right? So, you know, I had David come in here and he saw some phones and he said, okay, I'll take that one. He knows. Okay. I thought, great. No big deal. Guess what happened? 5 minutes later, he came in, knocked on my door. And I said, oh, yes, son. And he said, Papi, gracias por ayudarme. And he gave me a hug. This big, beautiful young man, 16-year-old with his hair, you know, crazy, right? Like everyone these days. Big muscles because he works out every day, like 2 hours a day. He felt so moved that I helped him with his phone. And he gave me a hug. He said, Papi, thank you for helping me. Because, you know, he's dependent upon us, right? He's 16. He can't go and just get on Sprint and go buy himself a phone, right? And thank God that we can help him with a phone. So, I mean, all these things that we're thankful for. But my point is not the phone. My point is that he felt loved by his father in a tangible way that means something to him. And that's just another lesson, kind of like this UPS thing, this UPS note. These are just the lessons that we're learning. And will we lose all this? Of course, we will be tempted to go back to running around making money. And I'm not saying that's bad. I mean, if your rent, as I said, is $2,000, you have to make $4,000 to pay your bills and pay your phone and eat and go out. I mean, once in a while, right? So then church and spirituality and love and knocking on your neighbor's door and inviting your kids' friends over, all that goes out the window, and that's where we've been. And then we get sick, and maybe that's where we are now. Maybe we've gotten sick as a global village because of the stress. I mean, haven't you noticed how stressed out we have all been? How anxious and fearful and depressed or hyperactive. I was reading this chart by an MFT, a doctor of therapy, a therapist, about how in crisis there's the middle zone where we all tend to, kind of fluctuate between being at a good level and being at a low level. Kind of, you have one of those days sometimes you feel great. But then above that line, there is a hyperactivity, which we call anxiety. And underneath that lower stage, there's depression. And so it's been interesting to notice how, at least in my life and the people that I talk to, how we've been bouncing off the walls. And again, there's no judgment here. This is just what's typical. If anything, I always long to be to you a open portal, authentic man of God, to the best of my ability, that can say, this is reality. I have no interest in being some mega superhero for you. What's the point of superheroes? I mean, even our presidents and our spiritual leaders were nowhere to be found for the last 8 weeks. That's something that I do feel convicted about. None of our mega pastors, I mean, Joel Osteen or Tony Robbins or Oprah, or even our artists, I don't know, Drake or Travis Scott or Post. Where were these? Where was Kim Kardashian? I'm not saying that we should expect anything of these individuals, but we weren't led by anyone. I mean, we did our little part by putting this sign. I think we're all doing our best, right? Again, no judgment here. This is not about judgment. But even amidst Noah's ark, God did use a man named Noah. Even amidst the disaster of Nineveh, God used a man. His name was Jonah. Even amidst the chaos of Christians being killed and martyred and persecuted, God used a man named Paul. He used a man named Peter to bring people to repentance on the day of Pentecost. And so, who led us in this season? The virus led us, right? The coronavirus led us. A virus that we can't see, that was here to, as an angel of death, you could say, that's what led us. And speaking of an angel of death, even during Moses' season, right, when God sent these plagues, I've been reading Revelations a lot. I'm going to preach on that this Sunday. It talks about the 7 plagues at the end of the world. But I thought about the 10 plagues, right? Or I can't remember right now. I think it was 7 plagues as well in the times of Moses in Egypt. The final plague was the death of the firstborn. It took all these plagues for Pharaoh to let go of the people of God and to lessen his grip, and for God to cause this man to trust, or to not even trust, but to surrender to God. But my point is that even in that horrible season of death, and even the waters of the Nile turn into blood, there was a man named Moses who God used to rescue his people. Who were the Moseses? Is that a word? Am I a Moses? Are you a Moses? I think we all are Moses, right? God used us all. Yeah, there wasn't one man, but maybe that's also another thing that's falling apart. Maybe it's not about one man. It's about 1,000 men and women. It's about 1,000 Moseses in the hospitals and in your home. It's about that sign that meant something to the UPS man. It's about, I had some friends sent me a picture of his wife dealing with stage 4 cancer. And the morning that she was going to go to get her first round of chemo, the husband had called some friends to basically cheer on his wife at 8 a.m. outside of her house because she was on the way to the hospital that morning. And he posted a picture of her opening the door of her house, and across the street, because, you know, of all this stuff, there were 5 or 6 or 7 cars, and all the people outside of their cars with signs and all this stuff saying, "We love you. We're praying for you." I mean, that's a miracle. Those are the Moses that are showing up everywhere. So maybe it's not about one man or one woman. Maybe that's another lesson. It's about 1,000 Moses. It's about 1,000 ways that we have shown up. It's my simple way to be there for my boy, to put that sign out there for the UPS man. It's all the little things that you've done. I have a friend who every day sends me texts with verses. That's how he has been a Moses in this season. Maybe it's not about one man, about one Savior. We already have the one Savior. It's about the 1,000 Moseses, the 1,000 little Pauls and Peters and Jonahs and David and Noahs. So maybe that's what God is teaching us, right? To not rely on one man, one woman, one church, one building, one event, but to be the church. And that the gospel will be heard throughout the world, not by one man or not because of one woman or because of one country even, but through 1,000 people being present. Well, those are the thoughts that I have this morning. Thank you so much for being here. There's still a lot to consider, right? And a lot to ponder, but I think so far